Epperson and Swaim, their dicks are shaped the same. These two podcasters are walking disasters, but nonetheless happy you came. Hey! Welcome to Anders Sons, a new season, a fresh start with me, your host, Michael Swaim, and then the man colloquially known as the fantastic Mr. Fucks, Abe Epperson.
You bastard.
Nailed you. I know you.
That was a great intro.
I just know you. Thank you, dude.
Yeah. No,
great intro for a great show.
How did you know that they used to call me the fantastic Mr. Fucks?
See? Yeah. It involved
That's crazy.
Having you tailed and going through your high school record and shit like that.
You must have interviewed people in my neighborhood.
Yeah, I was
where.
Come on, he was like great Mr. Gyrate, right? And they're like, that's not quite right.
For a bit, for like 6 months.
And they led me down a trail. Finally, I met with someone in the Vatican at night, and they unfolded a scroll, and it said, fantastic Mr. Fucks. And I was like, that's it. That's the one. I Da Vinci coded your ass. Yeah.
Let's take you to 2009, everybody.
Please
this is,
do.
yeah.
I was doing much better then.
Sometimes we talk about Paul Thomas Anderson, but tonight we're talking about Wes Anderson.
Go Wes, young man. Yeah, we're talking about 2009's fantastic Mr. Fox, if you didn't pick it up from our witty repartee already. By Roald Dahl, same artist, author who brought us The BFG, James and the Giant Peach, Danny the Champion of the World, that one about witches. And that's all the Roald Dahl books I know. Were you a big Roald Dahl kid?
Yeah, I do a Matilda.
You dabbled? Oh, I forgot Matilda. I think Danny Champion of the World, I believe, is the first chapter book I ever read. I remember as a kid being like, this is a real book.
That one didn't scan to me as the others did.
It's less famous because there's no magic in it. It's literally just about a son and his deadbeat dad who sort of is rough around the edges and like takes him pheasant hunting and teaches him how to shoplift and stuff like that. It's almost like Kikujiro, that movie we saw. It's like, what if your father figure was well-meaning, but he's rough around the edges, you know?
Yeah.
And kind of a low-key criminal. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's on brand because like, leave it to Michael Swaim to be the guy who like chooses one offbeat. Maybe I'm wrong about this.
No, it's a deep cut. Danny Champion of the World is not the popular Roald Dahl book by any means. We're talking Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Come on.
I didn't know about Fantastic Mr. Fox, and I was familiar with the writer, you know?
That is one that I didn't know as well. So my first introduction, which should be said, is to this film. This is my first introduction to the idea of Fantastic Mr. Fox, as it sounds like it is Abe's. But for the record, just we'll say it out front, the book, from what I understand from researching it for this, ends at the point where the cider washes them all away.
Mm-hmm.
So no, right before then.
Wait, do they just die?
No. Right before then is what I meant to say. You know how he gives a pep talk at the dinner table in the sewers where he says, this is all fine. We're just going to live in the sewers. This is fine.
Yeah.
That's where the book ends. So Wes Anderson added, what if it got flooded and they had to do all the zany madcap climactic act 3 type shit, right? And it makes a lot of sense. That's what makes it a movie.
Yeah. I think that's probably a good choice for the movie, to be honest. My familiarity with this is not just that I didn't know the book or the short story from which
I don't even know what a fox is.
But I held off on watching this because I think it was, God, at this point, 2000s, like 18, 19, you mentioned to me in a conversation that I'd like this more
hardline,
spiteful of Wes Anderson.
Is
and it's not. I wouldn't say that.
You were a real monster about it.
Yeah, I was a real piece of shit, and you were like, "Hey, it's animated, and the control in which Wes Anderson kind of functions under, with what movie making is. This is what he's good at." Like, this is kind of the best version of a Wes Anderson. And I do agree, it's almost a perfect Anderson. I just don't Love it.
Oh, I was hoping that was your answer. That makes for a more vibrant conversation. That's
Yeah.
interesting because I thought
I
you'd
really
suck
wanted
it
to
up.
like it.
I thought you'd slurp this one down like a piggy
Yeah,
and
no.
just love it.
I scoffed and rolled my eyes, and I'm sure listeners who love this film and love Wes Anderson are being like, "This fucker."
Well, there's
going to
be parts
better
where I
than.
go, this part was so funny, and you're going to go, that's what I scoffed at, and we'll get into it.
No. I mean, I think that there's genuine beauty in this film, but we'll get into it as you said.
Yeah. So on this show, we usually diagram things through 3 lenses. They are, I'm a little rusty, but I believe they are pedagogy, diegesis, and howdy do dat. I switched the first 2. I think we start with diegesis, which is basically just what happens in this movie. Other podcasters, better podcasters, would just call it a synopsis, but I hate synopses, so I call it diegesis. And this is if you haven't seen it in a while, or just you want to see how it bounced off of us, what's stuck in our minds. This is our best recollection of Fantastic Mr. Fox, real quick in a nutshell, with some funny commentary scattered throughout as it occurs to us. So I'll kick it off.
Yep.
Speaking about that control, we see it immediately in the fact that the opening shot is a poem, the poem I parodied at the top of the recording. Bogus Bunsen Bean, one short, one fat, one lean. Though these 3 crooks, though equal in looks, were nonetheless equally mean. That's it. So these 3 pieces of shit is our initial offer. And then we just see patchwork farmland from directly above. Like, if you know Wes Anderson, you understand what I'm saying. A right angle looking straight down at a grid, almost like a diagram of farms and the earth. All autumnal colors, all yellows and browns and stuff like that. Super Wes Anderson-y. So down to the point where, and this reminded me of like Napoleon Dynamite, it opens with a guy holding a book in front of camera, and the book has the New York Public Library sticker on it. It's all these super cute touches, very Wes Anderson, very New York elite. And that's the story of Fantastic Mr. Fox. So we meet him. He's doing yoga by a tree, listening to Davy Crockett, which gives you an insight into how he views himself. And he does his signature move, which is, what would yours be, dude? What would your signature sound be? Yeah, mine's like a,
yeah, a little slurping sound.
Yeah, but he does the whistle click click. We get some sprightly banjo music as him and his wife, who they don't name until the end of the movie, but working backwards, her name is Felicity. Yeah. You don't even know her name. There's no way to know her name until like 90% of the way through the movie.
Mrs. Fox.
Mrs. Fox. She is there to be his wife and come down on him. That's the Anderson-y part that I don't like that we'll get to, is that the underlying bones are still pretty Bottle Rocket and like Tenenbaums. But okay, for better or worse, his wife and he are having a grand old time killing chickens as foxes do and stealing chickens from farmers. They get trapped in a little trap through a funny little miscommunication where he thinks, I thought that moment was funny. I think I understand this trap.
Yes.
You pull here and that thing drops and then it drops on them. And he goes, nope, it just falls straight down.
It's straight right down. Fucking us both.
Yeah.
Maybe we're dead. Yeah, no, it's a great little bit, but yeah, it does. It's indicative of Mr. Fox's. I mean, that's its goal, right?
Right.
He is his own foil.
And he gets in his own way. We see that immediately.
Yeah.
And how Wes Anderson-y is it for her answer to be, I'm pregnant.
I'm pregnant.
That's the basic kind of offer I think he's happy with, he's comfortable with. And I imagine that was not the story in the Roald Dahl book, but maybe I'm wrong. I just imagine it didn't play out exactly like that.
I don't think it's that way.
Yeah. But because they're pregnant and their lives need to be safer, he promises that he'll find another line of work instead of being a fox and killing chickens. And he becomes a newspaper man. So we flash forward to 2 years later, which is 12 Fox years later. So it's a 1-to-6 ratio. And they all live at a place called Number 1 Bramble and Shrub, where he's like, they live in a bush like foxes do.
A lot of bees.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He writes a newspaper column. Their kid is Jason Schwartzman, and he doesn't want to go to school, and he wants to wear a white cape all the time because he likes this comic book called White Cape. and he spits on the ground whenever anyone tries to like connect with him as a human being. He's a shitty kid. I do like.
He's a shitty kid.
Yeah.
He's 12 and he sucks. But who isn't 12
and feels bad
sucks?
that everyone knows he sucks. That's what he's pissed about. He keeps saying
he's a little bit.
He thinks he's an athlete, and he's clearly not. He thinks he's as cool as his dad, and he's clearly not. Or is he? We'll find out later.
Yes.
Fox wants to move above ground. Says, I'm 7 non-Fox years old. I don't want to live in a hole anymore. It makes me feel poor. Wife, we are poor, but we're happy. Hey, those sound like good starting conditions for a children's story.
Yeah.
So they, well, first of all, he eats his morning breakfast like a fucking wild animal. Did that bit get you?
Yes, of course. That's a wonderful bit. Anytime, multiple times, because the next scene is actually Mr. Fox and Badger Lawyer, and they plead, like the Badger Lawyer pleads with him not to purchase the tree
he wants to live in. Yeah,
and they have a moment where they like go and they go feral against each other, and they fight like you would imagine a badger and a fox would fight for just a split second. It's a great bit. They do it several times in the movie. And no one is hurt. It's all.
They mostly just say, "Don't cuss at me. Don't cuss and point at me. Are you cussing?"
Oh yeah,
with
that's
me?
another thing, which I thought was also. I love that for a children's story. Just the idea that all cusses are replaced with the word cuss.
All cusses are. At some point, someone calls it a real cluster cuss, and I was like, "That's the peak of that. That's so good."
Yep.
And then there's graffiti in town that just says "cuss." Like someone tagged
someone was
cuss.
like, I'm gonna cuss right now.
Love it.
It's a great little bit. It's there's no denying that there's charm here.
And I think it also supports the final message, which, jumping ahead, is ultimately we are wild animals. It kind of reminds me of our Nightmare Before Christmas concept or chat. We are wild animals. That's what we are, and we can't change that. Which in this context, we'll talk about it. It becomes complicated because
the Selic of it all.
It's kind of like saying boys will be boys and everyone just better get out of the way.
Yep.
But it does show in little ways that even though they can talk and they have IMAX and they have Post-it notes, these are wild animals, right? So when they eat, they go crazy. When they kill chickens, they get the bloodlust. When they get mad, they fight like animals. They hiss and circle and growl. So they go and look at the tree that he wants to buy. They find out that there's a super who's an opossum who lives there, who's easily scared into playing dead. And that's his whole bit. His name's Kylie. And this, I found out, was actually based on Wes Anderson's real life. So I assume it's not true in the Roald Dahl book. But I wrote down a note at some point.
Did he know a possum?
Does he live with them? No, it's like Kylie. Does he live with them? He seems to be there all the time, even when they're having breakfast and stuff.
Yeah.
And that's not my understanding of what a super is. But Wes Anderson had a situation where he moved into a new house, and the guy who was responsible for renovating the house, the contractor, said, I'm going to live here while the renovations are going on because they're so major. And he said, that's okay. But there came a time where he was just living there. And he eventually had to ask him, like, when are you moving out? When does this end? Which is hilarious to me and informs the character of Kylie here.
Yeah, I 100% hate it, but it makes sense to me that Wes Anderson, probably in Paris,
right,
grabbing some baguettes, bringing them home to some stranger in his house,
and going,
living with it and loving it.
Isn't this a quirky kermuffin that I've bumbled myself into? This is the movie. So we also get to learn Bogus, Bunce, and Bean, one short, one fat, one lean, who are 3 farmers that are the big bads of this, although they barely talk. I was reading something like they only have like 4 lines per scene and they're only in 3 scenes, other than Bean, who's the guy who's the tall, lean hunter guy.
Who's played by Michael Gambon.
Sir Michael Gambon. He only drinks alcoholic cider. And his only goal is to shoot varmints, right? So, he's going to be a force to reckon with. Nevertheless, like Danny Ocean, this is too much for this fox to resist. He's like, I specifically want to steal from that guy. Because come on, he's going, this is like the casino that can't be broken into. That's the one I want to break into, right?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right with like they are parallel characters in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
For some reason, we decided George Clooney was the guy who was like, did not want to move on with his life and wanted to stay forever the Bachelor. I wonder why.
Yeah, well,
probably because that's just true about his act 2 in his life.
In his life, in Clooney's life, I bet. Yeah. It's also just a cute little thing, conversation he has with Kylie where it becomes apparent he's going to do this behind his wife's back. He tells Kylie, put on this bandit hat. And that's not a good sign, right? And he gives a little speech about like, how can I deny the wild animal in me, stealing chickens and biting them and feeling their blood in my mouth? That's what it's all about.
As if Mrs. Fox doesn't have that a part of her. I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of
She's
myself.
also an animal. Yeah.
Yeah, no. I mean, I'm not saying.
And she helped him. She was there in the early days. She was there in the early days stealing chickens.
For sure. Yeah.
But she's grown up.
Yeah, she's grown up and she's decided a family is the priority, which I think is a pretty good thing that humans should tell humans story-wise.
I like that she paints little landscapes and they all have inclement weather. So like she only paints tornadoes or lightning crashing or things like that, lava flows. Right. At this point, roughly, we're introduced to cousin Christopherson, who is a guy who's just taller than Ash, who's the son, Jason Schwartzman. Taller than Ash, better than him. He meditates. He knows karate. And he's athletic. The dad becomes enamored of him and is like, look at this kid. This kid's a natural. Love this kid.
But remember, it's not specifically like I'm in love with this kid. It's just that he gives the off comment once in a while saying like, wow, this guy's pretty good at that.
Right.
And
but Jason Schwartzman takes that as my father has disowned me.
Yeah, because his father is closed. His father is someone who doesn't offer any opinion. So the fact that he says any opinion at all is an affront to Ash. So like I just want to scope that because it's just like, oh, it's all coming from Mr. Fox's inability to be a father
or to give his son the validation he so desperately and obviously needs.
It started before the movie started. Like this is more of a result of the disease. This is not the start of it. You know, it's not like and Christopherson comes in and causes a problem.
Well, Mr. Fox calls out the disease at the end when he's talking to his wife by the waterfall made of cellophane. A beautiful technique, by the way, stop motion wise, and says, I guess if everyone's not constantly telling me I'm fantastic, if I'm not frankly intimidating to people, then I don't feel good about myself. That's the disease. It's inside him. And it makes his son feel less than because he's so busy polishing his own
moral. It might
be
my favorite Wes Anderson scene in particular, because I think it's calling out the exact unusual of all of his movies. You know, it's pointing out, oh, this is how they all function. My protagonists are this type of person who has this specific flaw, and I am now pointing at it and saying that's a bad thing.
In a cartoon way, I actually think cartoon allows you to boil those things down to their simplest elements because you're trying to convey it to children. And because of that, this is almost the bones of a Wes Anderson story.
Yeah.
Like an adult version would be more fleshed out, but this just cuts to the chase. He just says, this is my damage. This is how it affected you. Because this is a children's story and it needs to be exceedingly clear. And you just get like,
this is the aspect of my dysfunction and how I aim to correct it, which is a great reason for making a movie, to be honest.
Yeah.
And it comes from, I think this little triangle here with Ash and Christopherson as sons and Mr. Fox, that is like the unit of trauma here. That is
and we see that the trauma isn't even specifically aimed at Christopherson until the dating thing, because Ash is a bitch to Christopherson, and then Christopherson cries quietly under the table, and then Ash comes down and sees him crying, and he just sets up the train and they watch the train together, which is a sweet little moment with no dialogue, just letting you know that Ash is a bitch sometimes, but he has a heart. He can be persuaded by the suffering of another being. So it's more an issue between him and his dad than it's displaced onto his cousin.
Which makes Silver Fox basically, the Christopherson basically I'm just perfect all the time. I'm a great guy all the time.
He dives and leaves nary a ripple. And also he's blue, which is interesting to note because the entire movie is brown and mustard yellow and, Wes Anderson colors. But
autumn colors.
He's specifically blue all the time just to show that he's a total interloper, completely different from the outside world, which is a nice little touch. When you have this kind of control, I think you can do cool stuff like that.
Yeah.
Not that you couldn't do that in live action.
But just that subtlety is effective because you don't notice it. You don't go, oh, it's blue. You just notice that, subtle. To my palate,
he looks different.
I've gotten used to this one thing. He looks different.
He's clearly not related to this family. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he says, put this bandit cap on. And then he says, and so it begins, which I like. That's always a good line to me in any movie. And they start robbing places, just robbing the three farmers.
I think we kind of pass time as he is intermittently hitting all three and just taking the stores of these three farmers.
Larceny montage.
You're not supposed to, because as the song kind of cautions, hey, these guys will kill specifically foxes.
Yes.
So
and they're killing beagles, I'm pretty sure. I know they don't play it that way in the movie, but they have this ongoing thing that they poison beagles with sleeping powder by gluing it inside a blueberry because beagles love blueberries.
Yeah, these dogs are getting high.
I'm just saying, blueberries are also poisonous to dogs, like grapes are and chocolate is. You're not supposed to feed dogs blueberries. So I choose to believe they all die. That's just what I choose to believe.
Just a legion of
dogs they're just
being put down.
They're shoveling dogs into the pig pen to get eaten up. Yeah,
it's pretty damning for Mr. Fox there.
Mm-hmm. But later we find out they have a dog who has rabies, and they're just keeping it alive so that they can use it as a rabies dog. Pretty gross.
Yeah, it's like it's almost like a fox and a hound.
Mm-hmm.
We're not meant to be.
Yeah,
and we need to make.
Now that's your movie. Could we do some kind of cartoon about that?
Yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know.
Maybe call it The Hound and the Fox? Anyhow.
Yeah, something like that. They meet Willem Dafoe at one point.
Right.
Because
wait, which one's he?
He's the rat.
Okay, so when they're robbing, one guy has chickens, one guy has goose because he likes goose liver pate, and one guy has alcoholic cider. And they rob them 1, 2, 3. And when they get to the cider room, yes, there's a rat there who is security. He works security for the farmer. So I want to know how and when. It's like a whole separate movie, like a Ratatouille movie.
Yeah, that's my whole question, too.
How did the farmer strike this deal with this rat? It's you get
are they
one
doing
jug of cider
deals
a day.
with rats?
Right.
That's the big question. Are they saying, look, like I imagine Michael Gambon sitting there going, look, rat, you got to do this for me. Yeah. And he's like, owes something to the rat.
Get out of it? Yeah.
Yeah. What's my vig? And it's like, look, my wife, they're telling each other backstories. It's a big problem, but like at one point, Bean pulls out after they've exploded, which we're getting to his tree. He pulls out some of out of the, rubble. The painting that Mrs. Fox was crafting, and he's looking at a piece of art that is essentially made by a fox, and he's just like, "Yep, that's fine." Like, so we're in this elevated kind of
reality for sure.
Reality
because
where
they do talk to each other. They can understand each other's language. We find that out by the end.
It's not,
And there's animal realtors who have computers. So I imagine there's been some point where a guy fumigates a tree stump and all the varmints are dead. And then he goes in and he has to clear out paper clips and office supplies and water
He's
coolers
like,
and shit. Yeah. Look at all this shit these little animals had in here. So it is a heightened reality where the humans are aware that the animals are anthropomorphic. I mean,
but
they
only
even go to school.
selectively.
Yeah, selectively.
They have their own school, but that's
Ash has a lab partner, so it becomes a recurring thing between him and Christopherson. His lab partner gets basically enamored of Christopherson, and they end up going steady. And he thought, because he's a toxic male thinking about sex
they don't
prizes,
even go steady, dude. She just is like asks a question.
She says we're going steady at some point. And that's later, though.
Yeah, but that's like reading in. Yeah, I guess that's probably true. There could be other scenes, but it feels like from the span of the movie that Ash is basically like, oh, you gave attention to another boy? I
thought we were the boy. Yeah. I thought I was boy, which is, of course, a very entitled but normal teenage boy way to feel. You're like, but we were assigned as lab partners. I thought that meant we'd fall in love. And it's like, no, I like this dude. The line I really like is, you're supposed to be my lab partner. I am your lab partner. No, you're not. You're disloyal.
You're disloyal.
Which
is such a Rushmore kind of
That
line,
is so
right?
Jason Schwartzman and Rushmore. My God. Yeah. It also reminds me of that sketch we love, the Donald Glover sketch, Girls Are Not to Be Trusted. Just similar vibes. Are not to be trusted. So they eventually have to contend with things like spotlights, alarm systems. They have to climb an electric fence, much like the show I love, Patriot, where he just has to climb an electric fence. So he just does. He just takes the pain. They just take the pain and climb the fence. But he feels alive, right? He's never felt so alive. And he starts plucking the chickens and putting tags on them and claiming to his wife that he brought them home from the grocery store. But she's smart.
She knows.
Yeah. It becomes pretty obvious pretty quickly, to the point where she says a line that I remember from the trailer that I do think is a good line. If what I think is happening, it better not be.
Yeah, it's one of the best red herrings of a line ever. And by that, I mean that you think that there's going to actually be a punchline. The second clause of that sentence, more or less, is going to be something, and they go backward.
It better not be happening. Yeah,
it better not be happening.
It's good joke math.
It's good joke math. It's great joke math.
Just like a real Cody joke from The Rat. Y'all are trespassing now illegally. It's like, well, yes, trespassing by definition is illegal. That's what makes
I think
that funny.
That's probably all Noah Baumbach, to be honest, because he does. I've seen him do that. He's a co-writer for the screenplay with Wes Anderson. And he's done that in a lot of his stuff as well. Just to point out that the stakes are now like through the roof, because literally they blow off the roof of the foxhole / tree that they now live in.
The farmers are now against him and trying to kill him, right? And this will make the bulk of Act 2.
And they hide in the bush near his tree, and Mr. Fox comes out one day expecting anything. They shoot up the place, and it's a very like American presentation of how they just start firing wildly. It's just like, get them. It's a very South Park kind of approach to blowing up something. And they sever his tail. They shoot off Mr. Fox's tail. And the Fox family, knowing that they're found out, I love this kind of detail, which is just that the Foxes go, oh, they know where we live, and they're human, and they want to kill us, so we now have to move away. Like there's no recourse.
We can't
here.
beat them, right?
Yeah,
or at least that's what we first think.
And so the solution, as it's always been, is to dig to avoid capture / death. And the humans basically bomb the tree. And at this point,
at one point in there, he says, "Cuss, we're in a tight spot," which I really think is an Oh Brother reference.
That's an Oh Brother reference. Yeah. It's got to be. Yeah. At this point, we check in with kind of Meryl Streep and Jason Schwartzman, Mrs. Fox, and Ash Fox. Mr. Fox's family's kind of in shambles at this point due to the fact that we're in Act 2 and Mr. Fox is returning to his thieving
Keeps
background.
doing whatever he wants with no regard to the family, right?
And Streep says in, the scene that you referenced, I shouldn't have married you, which is such a damning kind of, like very Wes Anderson, Royal Tenenbaums kind of thing to say. And his son confides also that he doesn't believe in him and resents him for it, because basically, I know you don't think I'm a good son, basically, which is a very prove yourself, son, which is a very interesting notion for this narrative to go. And so Mr. Fox, I'd note, really hasn't responded to this immediately. We get many scenes of this kind of
slashes his face. She's straight up gives him scars across his face.
He just kind of takes it. Yeah. He doesn't respond.
Well, it's funny because they're if they were humans, obviously, that would be quite an overreaction, but they're not. So we just accept it. It's part of them being wild animals.
Yeah.
But I will say, more than most children's things about anthropomorphic animals, this really leans into the weirdness of for example, at the end when he kills the rat, he slits his throat with his jaw. He bites his throat out, and you're he's a fox.
That's what he would do to a rat.
That's what he would do. It's just not what I usually see in these types of movies.
Yeah, let's talk about this a little bit later, but I want to talk about where camera is when he is in the chicken coop, so to speak. But yeah, so we kind of, at this point in the movie, the community of animals now confront Mr. Fox because the barrage of ammunition that's coming from the humans has now affected the community, including the forest. The whole forest is basically
they're using
from
steam shovels
aggression.
now. They're blowing up the hole to leave a little perfect butthole in the earth, and they're it's a siege. They call it a siege. At one point, I really like this detail. They set up 108 sniper positions.
Yeah, all of the employees of all of
snipers.
3. Yeah, and they all hate Mr. Fox. The animals
have turned on him because
we get
selfish.
a nice little rondo or a little ABA Prime kind of scenes with this bully that has also been a part of Ash's timeline.
He's a beaver.
He's a beaver who's just at one point he's the lab partner of Silver Fox of Christopherson. So at one point Christopherson says you sound like a bully, and then we get a scene where he's basically a bully, and then this final scene where basically Silver Fox fights him. He fucks him up because he knows karate.
Owns him with karate, right.
Yeah.
And of course, Ash doesn't want that. He didn't want him to fight his battle for him. That's also humiliating.
And I love that line that Silver Fox says at the end, which he's I can fight my battles for me, more or less, is what he says to him, where he's
and he says, want you to. No, you can't.
No, you can't. You are not good at fighting, which is really the final call to action for Ash to both prove himself to his father, to himself, and to Christopherson, basically to the community, that he is his father's son, which once again, that's what everything matters, is that you got to prove yourself to daddy.
Prove that you are also fantastic.
Yeah.
Then Mr. Fox says he's come up with an incredible plan. And the incredible plan is to dig sideways instead of just digging straight down, which they should have thought of easily the very first day. Dig sideways. If they're just digging down and down and down and trying to attack you, and you have to dig down and down and down, guess what, asshole? Turn any direction and now you're good.
Yeah, it's about as clever as a fox.
That's right. So they dig under their farms and rob them all again, one at a time. They kill a bunch of chickens. They dance to celebrate. They dig into the cider cellar and dance to celebrate.
Hell yeah.
They go into the goose house and dance to celebrate. Then they steal real shit. You'll see them in the tunnel with TVs and shit. They're stealing their jewelry and shit.
I love those details too. And they're just, taking them into the sewers.
To such a degree that they have become a local folk legend. And we get P.T. I know this scene is neither here nor there, but there's like a protest song being sung around the campfire about people who are kind of rooting for the animals.
Yeah.
And Michael Gambon comes up and goes,
great.
"What are you singing, P.T.? I'm just making it up as I go along, really." Well, that's just weak songwriting. You wrote a bad song, P.T.
It's the best scene in the movie.
It's a good scene, yeah.
It's a great scene. It has nothing to do with anything other than telling an amateur musician that they suck.
That's
which
weak
we all can stand
songwriting.
behind.
You wrote a bad song.
You wrote a bad song.
So
PD.
the animals are all holed up in a flint mine, which is they treat as like a refugee camp. Everyone's trying to do mutual aid, community service, get people what they need to eat and drink, get people medicine, get people patched up. But it's hard times. Hard times have come to the farm. There's also a great scene where Mr. Bean flips the fuck out and like destroys their whole trailer. I liked the animation in that. It reminded me of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, the DiCaprio flipping out in his trailer. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I think the stakes also are upped at this point on both sides, because at one point Bean has this idea. He's like, well, I have an empire of apple cider. I'm going to purge them by filling everything with apple cider. And on the other side, as they're kind of this occurs while they're feasting on all of the riches that they've stolen from, the collective of farmers. Ash and Christopherson are captured by the farmers.
Because Ash wanted to go on a quest to recover his dad's shot off tail, which Michael Gambon is wearing as a necktie. So, it's a dangerous mission to say the least.
Yeah, and it's actually kind of like a packed act too, to be honest. Like, this is kind of the final bit of that, but like there's a lot that goes on here. There's a lot of story going on, because we also get the idea that Christopherson, who is the sole capture of the farmers, Ash gets away. They think Christopherson is Mr. Fox's son, which in the silly logic of this movie, humans don't just kill foxes willy-nilly. They negotiate and say, like,
a hostage swap and shit. Yeah.
But it has the added effect,
which is also funny, because does that mean Mr. Fox could go, "That's just my nephew, kill him, I don't give a shit"?
I mean, that's the would be
the logic
the
that seems to be implied. Yeah.
But yeah, he could do that, and they would be like, all right, we're gonna shoot this fox, I guess. But like, it has the added narrative effort of, Ash is now doubled down at this point. He's attempted and failed, and
the flood flooded everyone and washed them all away into the sewers, where they say, "Is anyone hurt? We're all hurt." So like, they're not doing good. The community is distraught. Everyone's mad at Mr. Fox. This is the point where she says, "I do love you, but I shouldn't have married you."
Yeah.
And he says,
it's the all is lost point.
"If people aren't intimidated by me, I don't feel good about myself." So it's basically, well, we'll talk about it later. Anyway, he apologizes to Ash after Ash gets back, having successfully saved Christopherson, because Christopherson taught him karate real quick, and says he loves him just the way he is, right? Which is the thing Ash has been waiting to hear his whole life, and that he is an athlete as he wants to be, and that he is proud of him, and he is fantastic. So to prove himself and that he's an adult now and understands familial responsibility, he's going to take a white flag up to the farmers to surrender and die if they'll promise to let all the other animals be in peace.
So he's doing a selfless act, I guess, at this point, even though he's created this situation by just moving into the tree. But he's doing the good thing. He's surrendering in order to free Christopherson, and the farmers prepare an ambush, which they kind of clever Mr. Fox kind of anticipates and gives orders. We get a little montage. It wouldn't be a Wes Anderson film if it didn't. This is where
Beach
you
Boys
go. This is the fun
montage,
games. Beach Boys, yeah. And so basically the animals prevail, and Mr. Fox and friends break into the location that Christopherson is at in order to free him. And just to throw out another scene that happened a little earlier in this. We get the final kind of act with the rat, where I just want to mention this because we will discuss it later, that Mr. Fox decides basically when he does his little white flag and he's like, I'm going to go give myself up, he runs into the Willem Dafoe again. And
Willem Dafoe has this crazy,
basically electrocutes him, as you said.
He has this crazy doomed energy that's just like, look, man, I am what I am and you are what you are.
I'm a rat.
And one of us has to die right now. That's just how it is. And I don't care which one it is. Let's die. Let's die. But
together. He lets slip the location of Christopherson. And then at this point, they break into like a compound, a literal compound, where like just the group of foxes / badger, I guess, or a possum rather, is in a situation where they're being fired upon, and Ash does some gymnastics to prove his athleticism to all, and everyone's very impressed, especially his dad. And Ash actually frees Christopherson, as you mentioned. They escape the gunfire and a rabid dog, turning their enemy against themselves. Basically,
they release the rabid dog and it attacks the human.
The dog has rabies and they escape on a tiny motorcycle.
And the badger, played by Bill Murray, who said that he was a demolitions expert, indeed, starts throwing a bunch of lit on fire pine cones out from the sewers up into the world.
Town.
And they burn this town to the ground.
Yes. Imagine.
Like, the animals destroy this place. It's amazing.
Like, imagine some badgers and some fucking rats.
Ruined your town.
Just threw bombs into your bakeries,
basically
and
Molotov
your newspaper
cocktails.
offices. Yeah, Molotov cocktails, basically. So this is all happening simultaneously.
Dude, I love the rabbit does the prayer from Boondock Saints and then runs around with a sling, not getting shot by bullets. Espiritu Santi, Espiritu.
Having a great. It's a great.
It's a great battle scene.
It's a great battle scene. Very aware of its silliness.
Fox finds a tiny motorcycle that shouldn't exist. It's just silliness. But now, as the guy in the helicopter overhead says, tracking them, looks like a fox in a tiny motorcycle with a possum and another fox in the sidecar. Am I really seeing that right?
Well, I think it's the paraphrase of the line is like, does this mean anything to anyone?
Oh yeah, is anyone picking this up? Does this mean anything?
Yeah,
little tiny
and
fox
then immediately
and a motorcycle?
Michael Gambon is like, "Yes, you need to come pick us up."
Mm-hmm.
Like I have issues with this fox, and this all plays out. And as they leave, Mr. Fox and company take what's left of Mr. Fox's tail as they go. It's, as you mentioned, been made into a tie at one point and then ripped apart by a dog and another.
Yeah, it's just ornamental now. He's a furry because he wears a fake tail. He's technically a furry. Also, Ash at some point in here apologizes to Christopherson and they make up. He says, I'm sorry, I'm grumpy, I spit, and then he spits on the ground. And I just liked that. It reminded me very much of the brother fight in Tenenbaums when Stiller chases Owen over the wall.
Yeah.
And they finally just make up and it's like, well, we're still family, right? And I think I had another thing about Ash, but whatever. He runs the gauntlet all bravely, just like his dad used to do. And he uses a rake as a whack bat in a really impressive way. And he breaks the doorknob and digs down and does all these flips and moves to where the dad's like, oh, he does have it. He is my son. And he replaces his tube sock that he was using as a fake bandit hat with a real bandit hat. And now you know, father and son are good.
That
again.
has been completed. Yeah.
I also really like the trivia that earlier in the story, Felicity said to Ash, you have 29 minutes to come up with a good apology for your cousin. 29 minutes later in the film is when he apologizes to Christopherson finally.
Yeah, and
jokes.
It's really just
I like jokes.
It's jokes. It's calling out exactly when you do it. And
he
so
says, Ash, That was pure wild animal craziness. You are an athlete. Here, put this bandit hat on.
And that's
He's
all
part of the group now.
that you need now. Yeah. He just need to acknowledge his fucking son. And basically at that point, there's an epilogue where the animal kingdom now lives in a well-to-do sewers on the up and up, inviting other animals to stay there. Mr. Fox apologizes to his wife for being reckless, and she immediately forgives him. His son is now accepted by his father's ambitions. So they're both happy. And Mr. Fox leads them just intuitively to a hole in the ground that leads to a supermarket.
Yes.
Where they'll feast as long as they can.
It's now the movie Over the Hedge, officially.
Yeah. And Mrs. Fox reveals she's pregnant again, and that causes everyone to dance.
They dance to celebrate.
Zoom out and end of movie.
Well, we zoom out to reveal that the supermarket itself is owned by Bogus Bunsen Bean.
Yeah,
so
you gotta keep burning the people.
Gotta burn these. These farmers will never get a day of respite until they finally blow their own miserable brains out. Fuck these farmers.
Because they all suck. Yeah, they all suck.
We're gonna ruin their lives. You forgot a little interlude that I do think is important. It's a sea runner. Is that he says he has a phobia of wolves several times. And then after they make their great escape on the motorcycle, it's the best shot. A wolf stops on the ridge and he looks at it and he's like, "What do you want, wolf? You know I have a phobia of wolves. You all right, wolf?" And then the wolf just raises a fist in protest.
Yeah, well, it's camaraderie. It's like, hey, I'm kind of a dog.
You're kind of a dog.
And the wolf is just like, I don't know what you are. And then over a little bit of time, he
Canis lupus. I am Vulpus
up.
Vulpus. I don't think he speaks English or Latin.
Yeah. What a majestic animal.
Yeah. I gotta say, I love in stories where someone has a meaningful interaction with a wild animal. Like when you're, a movie where there's a bunch of stakes and a bunch of shit going on,
man. But it's just like, remember, they're animals. That's the only.
Yes,
joke.
But I'm saying in a realistic way, I actually found it kind of moving. Like I always am a sucker for. There's a bunch of stakes going on and you're all wrapped up in your own drama, but then suddenly you just meet a deer in the woods and you have a quiet moment of looking at each other, and that feels a certain way.
Yeah, it's also totally. It's also a very Pixar thing, because Pixar likewise does this thing where randomly it will just decide to give you scope, to just say, here's a scene where isn't this weird? Isn't this crazy? And it's a benchmark of like the blockbuster. We love stories that can make fun of themselves or take the wind out of their own sails in a way. But we don't want them to point it out and be like, isn't that cool that we did that kind of thing?
Yeah.
And this movie does not do that. This movie just says, here's just a moment. Let the moment play out. That's exactly how it goes.
So this is pedagogy where we get to just talk about our thoughts about the film and the making of the film. I think we're already in it. No, I agree completely. And I think, so I just wanted to ask you, because you said you didn't care for it. I want you to elucidate that, but through the lens of, do you agree that the level of control that animation gives him makes the Wes Anderson shots more acceptable and less loud?
Of course. I think actually he's always so precise,
Yeah.
And I think that it's on display here. I don't think anyone can deny that. And I think any viewer is going to be like, yeah, that's exactly what's happening.
And the whole team, I'm sure he wasn't individually thinking of every single detail. It's clear that the whole team was thinking of cute little details. Like, what could a Badger lawyer have in their office? And if you look around almost every shot, there's all these cute little details that are like environmental storytelling. And I think that's the kind of thing you get only with stop motion or a production designer who has an infinite budget.
Yeah, for sure. And it's easier to do when it's all done in essentially diorama, like the Dollhouse filmmaking quality that I think you're talking about. Also,
their treehouse is treated like a dollhouse. Yeah.
Yeah. You can essentially create that at scale, literally. Yeah, my problems with the movie come down to two basic things, and the big one is that I think that it's just a hallmark of Wes Anderson when individuality is an ideal and tantamount to community, but not more important than. That's what the movie's saying. One that essentially gives is best. But does this movie do that?
Does it execute on that in a way you really feel?
Do you feel that way that Mr. Fox goes through that journey?
I don't think he means it. I don't think it's stuck in him. I think he's still a sly fox. You know, there's like a wink even to the end of the thing. Only because I'm comparing it with Wes Anderson's other movies as well, and that is informing my thoughts. So it's like, it reminded me most of all of Bottle Rockets, because it's about guys who are wild animals and they can't control themselves, and you're supposed to come to terms with, that's good actually, because that's the way they are. And the arc is...
But it's also every Bill Murray character in Wes Anderson movie.
Yeah. And the arc is like, can you learn one shade of responsibility? Can you grow up? Or is it boys will always be boys? And I'll just say that bores me at this point. That's not just Wes Anderson. So many broad comedies are like Failure to Launch or anything, you know, so many shitty comedies.
Even the beloved ones
are like, you just can't grow up, get a job, and then maybe I'll marry you, right? Shaun of the Dead.
Never do wells.
Yeah. I've got to grow up. I've got to be a man, a real man. And I think that is a product of culture, making it easier for especially white men to stay in their adolescence for a long time. And so a lot of people come to grips with and then write stories about that coming of age, and that coming of age sometimes coming too late. Like you're dragging your feet. Okay, you finally man up and are going to be a good dad. And I think it sort of buys into this idea that once you're a dad, something is lost. You're not vivacious anymore. Now you're just a dad. But that it's the lonely road we all must walk down someday. And I'll just say, not all that sits well with me. I don't necessarily think of life's journey that way. But it is a classic staple of comedy arcs. The male husband who can't stop doing shenanigans, and then he finally learns to just cut the shit out and grow up. That's his big lesson. And it's the
particular way in which Wes Anderson protagonists see themselves as awesome all the time, and they see all other characters as archetypes, like as they fulfill moments in the protagonist's story. And I know that literally is what story is. Like any writer is going to sit down and say, you craft story for the most part this way. You build a character around like, what's the impetus? What is it going to do to my protagonist? But I always feel it's more arrogant when Wes Anderson does it. And I know that that's like...
It feels more like he has found a particular kind of dysfunctional family scenario that he's really comfortable writing around, that really works for him. Like, this family is not unlike the Tenenbaums family, is not unlike the Bottle Rockets guys. And that's okay. It's okay to do basically one thing. It's still very different by virtue of the fact that it's stop motion. And I know that's kind of a cheat, but as someone who really loves stop motion in and of itself, that is enough to refresh it for me. Like, yes, it's kind of like Royal Tenenbaums, but it's stop motion and it's a cartoon, and that makes it more delightful to me. And I do think it compares more to Rushmore and Bottle Rockets in terms of it actually has jokes. It has honest to goodness jokes that are really funny in it.
It really does. And there's a lot, like as I mentioned, there's a lot of charm here. I think that anyone who's watching it can behold the fact that like these are all craftspeople who are really good at what they do. And I don't just mean the fact that they're like filmmakers who are stylistically impressive and precise, but also like the heart of the story is also good in that like it does want to tell a universal story. And if it stands alone, it is a fantastic story. There's nothing to take away from that. But when you look in the aggregate of Wes Anderson's career, it's very telling that he has this like single mythology, like
he is what he is. He tells the story that he tells. over and
it's
over.
the same way that he approaches every frame to be like, I want to do flat space. I want to not have. Yeah.
I thought that was interesting because he does. There's also way more close-ups right down the barrel than I've ever seen in any other stop motion thing. So I think it was a bold choice to say, I'm going to have an emotionally resonant moment hit, and you're just looking at an extreme close-up of a doll with glass eyes. And like, I really am going to trust that the imagination of the audience can imbue that thing with meaning and life. And I think they do. I think when we get the close-up of Felicity talking to Ash and she's staring straight in camera and he's staring straight in camera, it works. And I'm surprised it works with dolls that small, because a close-up of their face kind of reveals how simple the doll is. It's just glass eyes and a bunch of hair. And they used to call it the Kubrick stare, this kind of extreme close-up. Right. And I like that he's willing to do Kubrick stares with dolls. I just think that's a cute idea.
No, yeah. And if I personally could see that and not look at like, oh, these are taxidermy dead animals.
Because they are real. It's real animal hair. And get this
hideous.
Is worse. The human hair of the human characters is really human hair. That's even worse.
That's right. I read that trivia too. It's just funny to me because it's like, it totally works. But like, if you watch it, just imagine me going like, ew, every time there was a close up, because that's kind of what I did.
Going, ooh, yeah.
Ooh.
But I did like, I did
like the movie though.
In the stop motion arena, a couple things that are laudable I got to mention. The boiling of the chemicals in chemistry class, I actually don't know how they did it. It was like with gelatin or something, but he's like dropping different liquids into a beaker and they're boiling and changing color. I thought that was really cool. And we already talked about the waterfall that's clearly made out of saran wrap, but it's beautiful. Yeah. Like they did a beautiful job with the really saran wrap. Yeah.
They are really impressive, which is probably a good segue into our final little, spectrum here, right?
Yes, although I'll say one more thing and then I'm ready, which is I did note that everyone is always either straight on or profile, right? We know this. Wes Anderson likes 90-degree angles. Mm-hmm. When Fantastic Mr. Fox is ignoring his son, he's 3/4. And I do think that's intentional and
that
cool.
That was good. I noticed because that, it's like, or I noticed that it was not the 3/4 shot is not something that, like, imagine a Wes Anderson movie right now, dear listener. When have you seen a 3/4 shot? And by that I mean, is it at an angle? Yeah. It's never at an angle. It's always flat space, as I mentioned. So it's always straight on. You know what it is.
But when Mr. Fox is about to fuck up or ignore his son, he's at 3/4. As if to say he's not even on the same plane as these people right now.
Exactly.
Right?
Which is one of the greatest maneuvers that Wes Anderson's done, because he has formulated essentially a stylistic approach to all of his films, which other filmmakers don't do that. Wes Anderson stands alone in that regard.
And he's able to play off of his own thing.
In terms of popularity, like other filmmakers do that and they say, I make a film in a certain way, but like David Fincher or like people that we mentioned in the same breath,
you couldn't make a movie Kubrick. That's obviously a David Fincher parody, but you could make a movie that's obviously a Wes Anderson movie easily. That's how formalist he is.
Yeah, exactly. And so because he's deciding to disrupt that cycle and go like, I'm making fun of myself, or not even that, I'm adjusting my formula in order to prove us like a story point. That is him deciding, oh, the story takes precedent over my storytelling of it. My impulses in which I tell the story. That I think is the right direction.
Yeah.
That I love when anyone does that.
Yeah.
Not just Wes
Self-awareness.
Anderson, but it's definitely something that when he does that, you go, I notice, and it's pretty cool. I did want to mention in that kind of same vein, the trademarks of kind of Wes Anderson.
Well, he didn't do a slow motion ramp. So that's
he doesn't
okay.
do the slow motion to end the movie, which we've discussed several times on this podcast. He does that kind of last narration over the movie over slow-mo. That's his trademark.
Yeah.
But I will say that the wide shot that we see of it pulling back as they dance in the shopping center, or the supermarket, that wide shot's like, I don't know if, to me, that has a similar effect. Their dance is dwarfed in frame, essentially.
And we're pulling back out really slowly. It's
really
true.
slowly.
Yeah.
So basically the shot is slowly pulling back to static wide of the grocery store. And by doing that, like, it more or less has the same effect as slow-mo, where it's just like everything is
And he
coming
manages to
halt.
justify it because you're pulling out to reveal a punchline. So it's great.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's very yeah. But we've talked about all the other trademarks, the diagrams for no reason other than charm. You know, at one point they discuss a game.
Yeah.
The idea a character is into meditation or yoga, and obviously the narrative consideration that your protagonist is a man-child.
Yep.
Who
That's
needs
the main
to pump
one.
to pump the brakes with a healthy reminder that individuality should be celebrated.
And
but
diversity is strength, right? He gives a big pep talk about how each animal has different abilities and that's what makes us strong. So it's this argument for being selfish in a way. It's this argument that the community's great and you do need to compromise sometimes for your family, for your loved ones, for your community. But at the same time, don't lose what makes you individual, because that is a special strength that can also benefit the community.
Yeah. And I wouldn't call this a trademark. I really don't want Wes Anderson to hear this, just because it sounds like I loathe him, and I don't. I really don't. But like, there's also, as it comes with Angelica Houston in several films, the benching of women.
Yes,
that is, I would argue,
there.
a trademark
For sure.
It's very much there. She kind of, her arc is that of acceptance, which is not a problem. But
she's a Marge. She just grumbles and grumbles and then accepts it.
Yeah, exactly. But that's kind of all I got.
Cool.
For the pedagogue.
So we'll move into Howdy Do Dat, which is where we talk fun trivia.
Ooh.
Here's, of course, the one that's really pressing to me. The titles and text used in the production design are in Helvetica bold. All previous Wes Anderson movies were Futura bold.
Oh my God.
And I do know the difference between those two fonts. That is kind of a bold shift up.
Well, Mr. Font Master.
I'm looking at it.
Yeah,
now.
it definitely it definitely gives it a different tone, I guess.
We love fonts. Our font was, what was it called? Altos Grotesque was the small Beans font.
Yeah, that's the poor man's Helvetica for sure. I
also think it's one of the few movies where all the voice actors are celebrities instead of storied voice actors, and it doesn't piss me off. A, because I know Wes Anderson's going to work with all his regulars. That makes sense.
Yeah.
But B, because they did something really cool, which is they actually took them out on location to record their lines. So, for example, they would go to a wheat field with a tree in the middle and record all the lines standing in the field together. They would go down into a sewer and record together.
Yeah.
And I really do think he gets great vocal performances out of standard actors. And I think if you haven't seen both back to back, you might not realize voice acting in some ways, I know it cuts out the body, so that helps, but it's almost harder than acting because you have to know exactly all you have is your voice to convey exactly precisely what you mean. And I think he gets really good performances out of his people that rival real voice actors.
Yeah, I think George Clooney, Meryl Streep, Michael Gambon, like, they're all fucking high.
Willem Dafoe is doing a full-on character.
Willem Dafoe is continuously my favorite Wes Anderson character. Like, the way he uses Willem Dafoe is like the best version of Willem Dafoe in my mind.
Yeah.
Like, not just this, but Zissou. Like, what a performance. But
And what
yeah,
a treat, like what a gift to give us specifically Willem Dafoe doing that. Wow, thank you.
Yeah,
If
thank
nothing
you.
else.
A little French fucking rat who despises himself. What a fucking great character.
Oh, other trivia. They almost got that scene banned because, you know, at the end, he slits his throat and then he says, "I'm sorry I had to kill you, rat. What do you want in life? What's your dying wish?" And he goes, "I just want cider. The thing I guarded. I want cider. It tastes like molten gold." And he takes a puddle of sewer water,
sludge,
and feeds it to him and tells him it's cider, right? To ease his passing. But the way it's shot, it looks like it's a puddle of blood from his slit throat and he's feeding him his own blood.
Yeah, I was a little confused by it too, but like, yeah, I got the gist of it and I got what he was dropping. This is something I feel like I should have mentioned during our, conversation about like the protagonist just utilizing people. Like even the redemption arc of Willem Dafoe feels like at the benefit of Mr. Fox to have a realization that life is fickle. Like it's one of those things, but like I'm glad you mentioned the sludge. The impressive kind of liquid work, the dioramas, all that stuff, like the parallax that you get, that's very, very subtle. CGI was only used in one scene in the flooding of the Flint mine. This is all done practically, basically, with just some elevation in post, but it's like CGI is not even on the table.
And it can't be overstated what a team effort
it's
it
all
is.
puppetry.
At one point, imagine this, Abe, as a director. He had 29 units working for him simultaneously.
29 units. Like you don't even talk to those units at that point.
That's like what's interesting is, I mean, there's been some people who said he basically directed this movie over email. And by like,
that's known about Wes Anderson too, is he likes to, he's kind of like us. We sit in our rooms all the time.
Yeah. And he'd look at incoming dailies and footage and pictures of models and he'd say no to that, yes to that. I don't see why this can't be a phone call. I can just do it from my room. Yeah, and he did a lot of it from his room. Meanwhile, he's got 29 separate groups of people out there laboriously shooting these sequences.
Yeah, altogether 535 puppets were made for this movie.
And they said it took 7 months for him to approve the Fantastic Mr. Fox puppet.
Right, and it had 17 different styles just for Mr. Fox.
Yeah.
And they had to be done in different sizes because of the differences in the actual like our miniature is this
there's
size.
Shots where they need to be tinier in scale relative to things.
535 puppets were made for the movie. 102 were just Mr. Fox. 1/5 of your puppets. Yeah.
And it's all real hair. That's the grossest shit, dude. It's animal hair and human hair.
Hideous. Take it back.
Yeah.
Take it back, please.
What else?
It was also shot on like a DSLR cam.
Yeah, that's cool.
Which is it's a very souped up one. It was a Nikon D3.
Mm-hmm.
So it was higher than full definition, or higher than 1080p. It can be shot.
Yeah.
But the idea is
they knocked it down to 12 frames a second.
Because you can take these huge megapixels photos. The reason they chose that camera is because it could actually take 12 frames per second at a high, like basically click, 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 click very quickly at a very high resolved kind of, just high resolution.
Yeah.
So that's what gives it that unique look, because our eyes are attuned to like 24 or 30. And 18 is what frames per second usually we're used to in animation, and this is more or less 12. Even though they do break that at random times, but that's the benefit of the Nikon D3 in this case, is that it could take a resolution that was higher than even cinema cameras would do. You know, you hear things like 8K, or even we're getting close to like 12K.
100K. Who gives a shit? It just
who gives a shit?
Up.
But here, this is during the boom of like 25 megapixels, and if you know anything about cinematography, that was all done to sell more cameras. But the idea that you need anything more than 18 megapixels is funny, just because
it's more than your eye can see.
Are you shooting something that is going to, is your photo going to be put on a billboard? Because otherwise it's not really that necessary.
You need to blow this up to the size of the Las Vegas Dome. Yeah.
It's
Las Vegas Sphere.
9999 damage. So they're doing 12 frames per second. They knew that limitation. They were like, that's cool. We like the 12 frame per second look. Might as well go crazy ham on the higher resolution to make it look really crisp.
Yeah.
And to control depth of field and the aspects of the lens.
And using the real animal hair means that every time you manipulate the model, the hair is slightly out of place. And he said, let's eat that too. Like, let's let it look that way. I like how the hair is rustling in a non-realistic way.
So that's why the stop motion looks so fantastic in this movie. And that is probably not just a credit to Wes Anderson.
No,
which it absolutely is.
The whole team.
But the whole team run by, obviously, Henry Selick, which we, mentioned.
A legend in the field. Yeah.
Legend in the field, Nightmare
Monkey
Before
Bone.
Christmas.
Monkey Bone's most important.
In fact, the Henry Selick used at this point, the most recent Tim Burton was Corpse Bride. He used those animators to animate this film, essentially. Like, that was the team that made. So Fantastic Mr. Fox, Corpse Bride. If you ever watch both of those back to back and go, oh, they look fairly similar, now you know why.
There you go. Also, this was the theatrical movie debut of Chef Mario Batali. And yes, that Mario Batali, the guy who wears orange shorts and Crocs, he plays the rabbit that did, Espiritu Santo and then went on a killing spree. And that's why the rabbit wears an orange neckerchief. The rabbit is Mario Batali. That's so weird to me.
I don't know who that is, but that's fantastic.
Oh, he's just a ridiculous celebrity chef who should not have any reason to be in a Wes Anderson movie.
He probably cooked a great meal for Wes Anderson. And then Wes Anderson was like, you know what? Come into my movie.
I also thought last kind of cute thing that I noted was how much they did, because Roald Dahl really was a hero of Wes Anderson's, and how much they did to like nod to that fact. So like Bean, Sir Michael Gambon, looks a lot like Roald Dahl, and the room in which Fox dictates his plan, his master heist plan, into like, he's sitting with Kylie and he's dictating into a microphone, into a reel-to-reel tape. That is how Roald Dahl wrote. He would sit and dictate into this reel-to-reel tape.
That's pretty cool.
That entire office is a recreation of a famous photo of Roald Dahl's office. I thought that was neat.
Yeah. Speaking of Roald Dahl, I didn't know this because I hadn't read the original story. But Roald Dahl apparently, right before writing the story, lost one of his children to measles.
Yes.
And then watched another one suffer from water in the brain.
Water on the brain, which is why it's about a father protecting
from
his
a car
family.
accident.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I thought that was pretty like, wow, this is dark. And one of the original, like when I watched it, I was like, you know what? Let's make a children's story about children instead of like adults.
Yeah.
Like that was one of. But now that I know that fact, it improves like my perception of this movie, because knowing that the original story was very much so a children's story that was written by kind of a father that
going
wanted
through some
to
real
write
shit. Yeah.
about a family and a father in particular, it doesn't make Wes Anderson's interpretation that off. It's not
agreed.
like his interpretation is to take James and the Giant Peach and make it about like George Clooney.
Right.
He's actually taking the source material and
True to the
using
spirit.
of it.
Yeah, true to the spirit. It just has a smear of Wes Anderson's normal shenanigans all over it.
Yeah. So I liked that. I like reading that.
I love this movie, but I'm real easy. If it's stop motion, I'm probably going to like it. So
yeah, you like animation more than I do.
I do.
Even though I do agree with your basic preface that animation is kind of a more perfect art because you control so much.
I think it's a more perfect art for Wes Anderson. That's maybe my only hot take. I think Wes Anderson should stick to cartoons. He's better at that.
Yeah, I think it's all the same. I think that he definitely has more control here, but control was never his problem. You know, like he is very controlled in Grand Budapest, Budapest Hotel or whatever. You know, like he's very deliberate in every choice and every floral print. So when it comes down to it, I don't think that he is necessarily improved by this. I am impressed by the craftsmanship of this movie, and I think it's one of his best. That's all I'll say.
Okay, great. Good spot to end it. Do we know what P.T. Anderson thing we're covering next? My gut says The Master, but
The Master is up next, baby. 2000, is that 9?
Unless we're both wrong, it's the same year? But I think it is.
No, it's The Master is next, but I just forget what year it is.
That's a creepy. I haven't seen that since theaters. That'll be an interesting rewatch.
I'm super excited.
Yeah, The Master's great.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks for bringing the positivity, my man. I'm sorry I'm such a grump when it comes to Wes Anderson movies.
That's what I love about you.
I really do like his movies sometimes. I just...
Oh, dude, wait until we get to Asteroid City. You're going to hear me shitting on so much, so hard.
I hope that's
time
my
will
favorite.
Come. I hope you like it. I hope you like it.
I hope I watch it and go, this is so pleasant.
I don't see how anyone could like it. If there's someone out there who really loved Asteroid City, I actually want to have it explained to me. Like, why? What about it?
Yeah.
Ugh.
We'll probably not have you on this podcast.
Yeah.
But, make sure and say that.
But let me know.
It's always a pleasure discussing story and narrative and theme with you, sir.
You too, man. It's my favorite thing to do.
Yeah.
And really I'm glad we're back with a new season.
Yeah.
If you miss Kings of Kings, sorry about that, but we'll do more later.
We'll be back, baby.
We'll be back. That'll be back too. And we will be back with another episode of Anderson's on the Master in about a month. This has been a Small Beans endeavor. We're a bunch of pals who make podcasts, sketches, music, web series, and movies. The beans always have new ideas percolating, so make sure to check us out at patreon.com/smallbeans. That's patreon.com/smallbeans, where you can browse all of our current and past content, see what we've got planned in the future, and learn how your support can help the small beans grow into huge, giant monster beans. If you enjoyed this content module, please like, rate, subscribe, or tell a friend about us. We love you.